I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Based on a True Story composer, Sherri Chung. Sherri, one of the reasons why this show is so compelling is that it's genre bending. It tonally shifts between broad, dark humor and suspense thriller, and like the first few minutes are actually quite horrifying. So I was just wondering, does that present any unique opportunities or challenges as a composer when it tonally shifts back and forth like that?
Yeah, I mean, based on a true story, as you said, is a comedic thriller, and it's kind of the first comedic thriller I've ever done. I think
Yeah.
a lot of the projects that I've done in the past have been very black and white. They're heroic, they're drama, there's rom-com. It's like so, yeah, and you always kind of know who the antagonist is, and you know who you're supposed to be rooting for, and the pinnacle of the goal is always justice, and justice will be served, and right over wrong. And this was a story where it's like, I don't know. Should we be rooting for this guy? Is this guy as bad as he said, as bad as we think he is? Is he as good as we think he is? And so the challenge musically was, I think with a lot of these types of projects, I'm guessing is that you don't want to give it away. You don't want to telegraph what the audience doesn't know yet. You don't want to ruin the fun of them trying to figure out for themselves who they want to root for and what they want to believe in and stuff. So I think that the challenge with this the score was a bit of that, but I think the success of the entire story, from the writing to the acting to the hopefully to the score as well, I think the success is that it kind of lies within the nuance, in the spaces between the horror and between the comedy, between the funny and the the really dark brooding nature of it. And I almost like a nervous laugh, where it's like, like, yeah, like you're not quite committing to the funny,
Yes.
you're not quite committing to the horror of it. There's obviously times where it's very polarizing. It's like, no, this is dark, there is some stabbing, there's a murder going on 100%, and that's just a matter of scoring what's on screen and just really elevating that kind of horror. So in terms of the score, there was a lot of gritty synths when it came to that, but when it came time to the comedic, there was a lot of just instrumentation that really, felt to me like my goal was to try and always make it as though there was a very, very tight string, a very tight string that could snap at any moment. And it could snap in a good way, like, comic relief, or it could snap in a really bad way, like our killer, could snap it. So always leaving the audience with this uneasy feeling, both with instrumentation and with, pacing and drive and other spotting choices.
Yeah. What you're doing in this is very nuanced, and I think it's actually super complicated, and it could have gone so wrong because it's really hard to get that tone correct. And for example, the credits track on the score does this really fascinating thing. It leans into the bold, pensive cues and percussive, plucky sounds that ramp up tension and danger, but in a really old school detective drama way. And I think to me, there's a tongue-in-cheek nuance in there as well, amplifying the darker comedy elements rather than just lean into the straight-up murder mystery. Am I onto something with that?
Yes, Rob, everything you said was completely intentional, and
Perfect.
that's exactly what I was going for. I mean, but to be honest, I'm thrilled to hear you kind of analyze it, and it resonates with you in that way, because it really was my intention. Originally, when I was thinking about the project, I was thinking noir for sure. This is like true crime, true detective
Yeah.
type of thing. I mean, we're talking trench coats, fedoras. I want typewriters. I want, brooding looks, dark alleyways, and in truth, none of that is in the story, but that was my intention. I'm like, this is a true crime type of thing. And so, I do think that there was a bit of an old school element, or like a throwback to like a noir situation that we already know. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the podcast, which is what the story kind of revolves around, is a podcast that they're trying to make. And then true crime podcasts in general, like America's obsession with that. I think that's kind of like the newer, private eye kind of
Mm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But to your point about instrumentation, gosh, nothing says funny like pizzicato strings. But I also kind of thought, I was like, yeah, but I wonder, you know, pizzicato can also be very tense, because again of that tight plucking type of string. And again, if you pluck it, do you break it where you laugh? Do you break it where the killer snaps and everything's gone wrong? So a lot of the instrumentation I was choosing was something that had very caustic, very, maybe not caustic all the time, but very biting sounds, and very, like the frequency was really, really cutting through. So things like, hand percussion that's very tight, has very tight, small drum heads. Pizzicato, I've already mentioned. Even a typewriter. A typewriter shows up in there just because it's got that, very sort of tight, um, you know, pointed sound.
Yeah.
And then of course the score, well, I should, a lot of it also has these very unexpected loud bangs, piano bangs and percussion hits, just to kind of keep everybody on their seats, hopefully.
Yeah, I tried to identify all the actual instruments that feature in that particular track, for example, and I lost count. And so just talk me through the diverse instrumentation that you wanted to deploy to bring that plucky, cheeky, but also dangerous tone that you were going for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a maximalist. I don't know if that's a word, but it's definitely the opposite of a minimalist. So
Yeah.
I to be honest, a lot of the challenges that I welcome in my own writing is restraint, and I think that that was one of the hardest things about this is that, especially when it came to this fast talking comedic sounds that Kaley Cuoco and Chris Messina had
Yeah.
between the two of them, and Kaylee's so expressive with her eyes. I mean, she almost doesn't even need to say anything, and it's like her eye,
Yeah.
the way it moves just kind of says it all. And I'll admit my first instinct was to kind of add to that. And a lot of what I realized what I had to do was really pull back from that and allow that to be the case. So but again, to your point about the instrumentation, is a lot of it is sort of whimsical instrumentation that's used in a very groove way, to get us, there's always a ticking. There's always a pulse going on, both to keep the tension or keep the drama moving, and then but also to have that keeping time moment, which is like something could stop, almost like a ticking time bomb. So again, with the hand percussion, very tight hand drums, or drum heads, smaller drums, so it's not very resonant or reverberant.
Yeah.
That said, coupled with these very sudden loud bangs of timpani doing melody, and piano hits and bangs, and harp, like those types of things, so it's a very loud, bigger, bulky instruments that again are hopefully jarring you out of your groovy, again, when something gets very predictable, it gets very comfortable. And so then having those moments of just like snapping it out, pulling the rug out, was a lot of the doing the complete opposite of higher stuff, to doing complete opposite, and doing lower, more reverby, louder booms, just really playing with frequency levels to try and play hopefully with your level of comfort, and playing with time, and time under tension.
Wow, that blows my mind because I was thinking like as a layman, just like, oh, this is really jolty and cheeky and dangerous, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. And the way you just explained it really helps because yeah, that tightness of the string and that it is precarious. And isn't that interesting how music can do that in a really unexplainable way almost, but it really does. And it reminds me that with your background, particularly in the superhero genre, like you are one of the go-to people for that genre. And then to stretch and do something like this, I wonder if the old saying, dying is easy, comedy is hard, is actually true when you're threading the needle between laugh out loud and darker humor. And we've touched on this before, but when all is said and done, did you find this particular genre something that was more challenging than you were expecting?
100%. Like I said, I kind of went into it thinking it's going to be one thing. I think a lot of us do. We go into a project thinking it's going to be this one thing, and then it ends up being something different, and you learn from the story, and you grow with the characters. But yeah, like, I, again, with it wasn't just black and white. This is horror, this is comedy, or this is funny, this is hilarious. There was a lot of, as you said, threading the needle, and a lot of very controlled tension. So again, that nervous laugh, and that feeling, and that sense of you know just that very uncomfortable nature, and really showing a lot of restraint, or sometimes really, really letting loose. And I think some of the way that I tried to do that, even if anything for myself, was to really change the instrumentation once we got into full on horror. From there, like I said, it was sort of these darker, grittier synths. There was less live sounding or acoustic sounding things that I thought were kind of letting us really, really dive into the discomfort. But then on the other side, having these lighter instruments that hopefully we're going to allow the audience to sink into something that's like, okay, we're not going to be blindsided by a jump scare at this moment, but just to kind of keep it really zany and quirky, but also just uncomfortable. But yeah, it was really difficult, and it was difficult to find that balance and that nuance. And a lot of people don't like comedy. I actually love writing comedy. But what was tricky was that this was a different kind of comedy than I had done
Yeah.
before. 'Cause it wasn't, as we just said, it wasn't just a straightforward, this is funny. Do some pizzicato or some, tuba. I mean, a lot of it harmonically too, I think is something, a lot of times in major you can do, that's funny, that's comfortable, that kind of thing. And this one, I was really trying to blur the lines between minor and major and just make it something that you can't really, hopefully, identify too much as a particular key.
Yeah, it was really hard for me to put my finger on it, but it was still so compelling. And I think that actually helped me put me in that frame of mind for what I was watching on screen. So, Sherry, on that note, beautiful work. Thank you for your insight. We're going to bring you back shortly for our panel.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.